The brightest star in the Tantalus cluster and a prominent feature of the Centran night sky remarked across all of human history. Firewatch is an M-type red giant whose system defied accessibility by Centran spacecraft through much of the assembly's history, due simply to the immensity of its giant star. Any attempt to reach the system using an inaccurate single-gate transit would almost certainly overshoot the narrow safety margin and result in an incinerated colony fleet. As a result, no attempt was made to reach the system for centuries. But this changed with the conception of the ambitious Wanderer project. In 236 PCU, the fledgling People's Modernist Party were 2 years into their first ever prime ministerial administration, under the leadership of Prime Minister Lucia Castillo, but despite their success in winning office, had largely failed to win the hearts and minds of the more traditionalist, typically grey hat-leaning voter base that makes up much of the Centran population. In desperate search of a means to secure re-election, Castillo's cabinet saw in the Wanderer project an opportunity for a dramatic exploratory victory, one to be forever remembered alongside the likes of Jyden Lockwood's first passage of Atomara 52 seasons earlier, or Victoria Weaver's legendary voyage through the Glancewend Strait some 360 seasons before that. This new attempt to reach the Firewatch system would make no use of any driftgate, but instead relied on a colossal purpose-built mobile platform, the Wanderer, which would embark on an 8-year voyage under its own power across the gulf between Rialtis and Firewatch, whereupon it would establish a self-sufficient colony on the planet of Firewatch 2, construct a return gate, and finally connect the Firewatch system to the larger Tantalus Gate network in a triumphant return less than 3 years later. In a wholesale abandonment of the Modernist Party's policies of frugality, which had won them election in the first place, the Wanderer project was granted exorbitant funding by the Ministry of the Treasury, and no expense was spared in its planning and execution. The Wanderer was commanded by Post-Captain Blair Bellamy of the CDF Discovery Service. Already a household name, after 14 years earlier, they had travelled farther from Centrum than any human in history, as part of their voyage to chart the outer edges of the Cardaeus Brink system and lay the foundations for the Carina Deep Space Telescope Station. On the 112th of Solstice 249 PCU, 3 months ahead of schedule, Captain Bellamy returned through a newly established drift lane to announce the complete success of the Wanderer project. With rich deposits of drift across the system's belts ripe for extraction, and an already fruitful colony on Firewatch 2. The success was met with a jubilant response by the Assembly Parliament and by the captivated public, with plans quickly put in place to convert the Wanderer into an orbital museum over Firewatch 2, which itself seemed set to become a cultural jewel of the Centrum Assembly. Firewatch 2 is a super-Centrum world, orbiting in the current habitable zone of Firewatch. Long before Firewatch left its main sequence phase, it orbited the outskirts of the system, beyond the ice line, covered by a meters-deep layer of ice. As its parent star expanded into the red giant phase, the thawing of the ice combined with the world's inherent geological activity has created a unique, eroded landscape, not seen in any other inhabited world in Tantalus. As the star's luminosity increased, the atmosphere thickened and heated up, in a cyclical runaway water loss scenario. Present-day Firewatch 2 is bereft of any liquid water on its surface, with the only remaining water being trapped in underground reservoirs and hydrated minerals in the mantle. The planet's latent heat can sometimes superheat some of these reservoirs, driving impressive geysers and creating natural areas for human settlement, providing both ample water and power. Upon arriving in system and making landfall, the Wanderer's contingent was able to utilize these power sources as bootstraps for industrial sites, with equipment brought aboard the platform. Rich ore deposits found in the vicinity of the volcanically active areas near settled outposts, dredged up from the planet's core and brought to the surface during eruption events, allowed for the construction of machinery on a time frame never before seen in any colonization effort. The presence of a dense, high-temperature atmosphere allows for the creation of an open-air design, by making use of an artificial inversion layer trapping the cold, breathable atmosphere mix within a concave, lowered region where settlements can be built. Large thermal pumps on the lip of the colonies keep its inhabited region at a comfortable temperature and humidity, allowing for the open-air cultivation of green areas. Modernist cultural programs prioritized various artisan professions in the early selection process for Firewatch colonists, and in the subsequent decades this has led to the planet developing a cluster-wide reputation for its unconventional artwork, elaborate metalwork jewelry, and most of all its potent Firewatch whiskey, which quickly became a favourite spirit across Tantalus, often imitated with varying degrees of success by distilleries outside the Firewatch system. Perhaps the single most iconic image associated with Firewatch is that of its oldest and capital city, New Idris, and its spectacular fire canal. Part of an ingenious system which channels lava from outside the city's walls through a broad subsurface aqueduct visible from the city streets through thick glass windows to a large shaft where it cascades down to the vast underground water reservoir over which the city was built, vaporizing the water below, whereupon it rises as steam to the surface without the need for any mechanical extraction system, to be then recondensed into potable water or used as an emergency power source. The ostentatious grandeur of Firewatch and the obvious favouritism shown to the project by the Assembly government came at the expense of the southeastern frontier, whose worlds had already been suffering from the Assembly's neglect for decades. Resentment for Firewatch and everything it represented became commonplace among the frontier's population, and provided a focal point for years of steadily building anger and discontent. This finally boiled over in 277 PCU, when a violent suicide bombing carried out by a small group of disgruntled frontier citizens destroyed the Orbital Wanderer Museum over Firewatch 2. 511 civilians were killed in the bombing, but far worse were the casualties inflicted by the deadly debris storms, which peppered the cities below for weeks afterwards, killing and injuring thousands. To this day, a memorial station rests in orbit, built from the scorched remains of the Wanderer's heat shield, to commemorate the victims of the tragic attack. Firewatch remains one of the most prosperous and comfortable places to live in Tantalus, further helped by the system having been spared from any kind of combat throughout the full length of the Frontier War. But by the same measure, this has led the people of Firewatch to be sometimes seen as sheltered and aloof by many in the Greater Assembly, and they continue to bear the hatred of much of the southeastern frontier. Firewatch's broadly good fortunes may well be soon to run out, however, as the darkest years of the Great Famine have left no corner of Tantalus unaffected. Thank you for watching. You can get the Sojourn through various distributors, all of which are accessible through www.thesojournaudiodrama.com. You can also get the series through Patreon, where you'll be able to access various bonus features, including our visual dictionary, Guinevere cross-sections, and anthology shorts. Remember to join us on Discord and get regular updates on all upcoming Sojourn releases. All the related links can be found below this video. Fair winds.